Hello horror lovers, welcome to our channel. If spine-chilling true stories are your nightly ritual, you've come to the right place. Before we dive into tonight's terrifying tales, make sure to subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to me. Don't forget to like this video and share where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support helps us bring you the best in real horror storytelling. Now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and prepare for a night filled with true nightmares. Let's get into the story.
My name is Lucas, and I never believed in the supernatural until I experienced it firsthand. I grew up in a small town called Black Hollow, nestled deep in the forests of Maine. The town was quiet, with a close-knit community that thrived on local legends and folklore. Among these stories, one stood out, the legend of the Black Hollow werewolf. As kids, we often heard the old-timers talk about the beasts that roamed the woods at night. They spoke of a cursed man who transformed into a monstrous wolf under the full moon, hunting anyone who dared to enter the forest after dark. Most of us dismissed it as a ghost story, something to keep children from wandering too far. Years passed, and I became a park ranger, just like my father. My job was to patrol the vast forest surrounding Black Hollow, ensuring the safety of hikers and maintaining the trails. It was a peaceful job, one that allowed me to be close to nature and the place I called home. One autumn evening, I was assigned to patrol a remote part of the forest known as Raven's Rest. It was a particularly isolated area, with dense trees and rugged terrain. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor, I radioed the station to report my location. The sky turned a deep orange, and a full moon began to rise. I had been walking for about an hour when I noticed something unusual. The forest was eerily silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive stillness that sent a chill down my spine. I quickened my pace, eager to finish my patrol and return to the station. Suddenly, I heard a low growl. My heart skipped a beat as I scanned the area, searching for the source. There, among the trees, I saw it, a massive figure partially obscured by the shadows. It was standing on two legs, covered in dark fur, with eyes that glowed a sinister yellow. It was the Black Hollow werewolf. Panic surged through me, and I instinctively reached for my flashlight, shining it towards the creature. The beam of light revealed its full form, towering over 7 feet tall, with powerful limbs and claws like daggers. Its snout was elongated, filled with sharp, gleaming teeth. The werewolf let out a bone-chilling howl and began to advance towards me. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest blurred around me as I navigated the familiar trails, desperately trying to put distance between myself and the beast. I could hear its heavy footsteps gaining on me, the sound of snapping branches and its guttural growls filling the air. I knew I couldn't outrun it forever. My only hope was to find shelter and pray that the creature would lose interest. Up ahead, I spotted an old hunting cabin. I sprinted towards it, bursting through the door and slamming it shut behind me. The cabin was small and dilapidated, with a single window and a heavy wooden door. I barricaded the door with a table and a chair, my hands trembling with fear. The werewolf reached the cabin and began pounding on the door, its claws tearing at the wood. I grabbed a rusty rifle from a corner, hoping it still had some ammunition. The door shook violently, and I aimed the rifle at the opening, ready to defend myself. For what felt like hours, the werewolf assaulted the cabin, trying to break through. Its howls echoed through the night, a terrifying reminder of the danger I was in. Just when I thought the door would give way, the attack ceased. Silence fell over the forest once again. I waited, my breath coming in shallow gasps. After what seemed like an eternity, I cautiously opened the door and peered outside. The werewolf was gone, but deep claw marks and splintered wood were left as evidence of its presence. I made my way back to the station at dawn, exhausted and shaken. My colleagues listened in disbelief as I recounted my ordeal. Some were skeptical, but others had heard the legend of the Black Hollow werewolf and knew there was truth to my story. The forest was closed off to the public, and a team of investigators was sent to search for the creature. They found the cabin and the tracks, but the werewolf remained elusive. The legend of Black Hollow had proven to be more than just a tale. I left my job as a ranger soon after, unable to face the forest that had once been my sanctuary. I moved to the city, far from the woods and their hidden horrors. But the memory of that night haunts me still. I share my story as a warning to those who might venture into the unknown. Sometimes, the legends are real. In the heart of Black Hollow, under the light of the full moon, the werewolf waits, a living nightmare, ready to pounce on the unsuspecting. My name is Emily, and for years, I lived in a small town called Pine Creek, nestled deep in the forests of Oregon. Pine Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and the pace of life was slow and steady. The town was surrounded by vast, dense woods, and it was a common pastime for the locals to go hiking, camping, and exploring the natural beauty that enveloped us. But beneath the serene surface, Pine Creek harbored a dark secret. Growing up, I heard countless stories about strange creatures and eerie happenings in the woods. The most chilling of these tales was the legend of the Pine Creek werewolf. According to local lore, a man had been cursed long ago, transforming into a monstrous wolf under the light of the full moon. The creature was said to stalk the woods, hunting anyone who ventured too close to its lair. I always dismissed these stories as just that, stories. That is, until one fateful night changed my life forever. It was late November, and the first snow of the season had begun to fall. The town was blanketed in white, and the forest looked like something out of a fairy tale. My friends and I decided to take advantage of the fresh snow and go on a nighttime hike. It was something we had done many times before, and the idea of trekking through the snowy woods under the light of the full moon was too tempting to resist. We set out just after dusk, bundled up in warm clothes and carrying flashlights. The moon was bright, casting an ethereal glow on the snow-covered landscape. We laughed and chatted as we made our way along the familiar trails, the cold air crisp and invigorating. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the trees grew denser, and the sounds of the town faded away. An eerie silence settled over us, and I began to feel a sense of unease. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild. Suddenly, we heard a low growl, so deep and menacing that it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We stopped in our tracks, shining our flashlights in the direction of the sound. There, just beyond the reach of the light, we saw a massive figure, partially obscured by the trees. It stood on two legs, covered in dark fur, with eyes that glowed an unnatural yellow. Panic surged through me as I realized what we were looking at. It was the Pine Creek werewolf. The creature let out a bone-chilling howl and began to advance towards us. We turned and ran, our flashlights bobbing wildly as we stumbled through the snow. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in ragged gasps. The werewolf was fast, and I could hear it crashing through the underbrush behind us. We reached a small clearing, and I spotted an old, abandoned cabin at the edge of the trees. I yelled to my friends, and we sprinted towards it, throwing ourselves through the door and slamming it shut. The cabin was small and musty, with a single window and a heavy wooden door. We barricaded the door with a table and a chair, hoping it would hold. The werewolf reached the cabin and began pounding on the door, its claws tearing at the wood. We grabbed whatever we could find, an old rifle or rusty axe, prepared to defend ourselves. The door shook violently, and I aimed the rifle at the opening, praying it would be enough to keep the creature at bay. For what felt like hours, the werewolf assaulted the cabin, trying to break through. Its howls echoed through the night, a terrifying reminder of the danger we were in. Just when I thought the door would give way, the attack ceased. Silence fell over the forest once again. We waited, our breath coming in shallow gasps. After what seemed like an eternity, I cautiously opened the door and peered outside. The werewolf was gone, but deep claw marks and splintered wood were left as evidence of its presence. We made our way back to town at dawn, exhausted and shaken. Our story was met with disbelief and skepticism, but the claw marks on the cabin were proof enough for some. The legend of the Pine Creek werewolf had proven to be more than just a tale. The town council decided to close off the forest, deeming it too dangerous for anyone to venture into. A team of investigators was sent to search for the creature, but the werewolf remained elusive. The legend of Pine Creek had become a living nightmare. I moved away from Pine Creek shortly after that incident, unable to face the forest that had once been my sanctuary. I settled in a city far from the woods and their hidden horrors. But the memory of that night haunts me still. My name is Kevin, and I grew up in a small town called Hollow's Edge, tucked away in the Appalachian Mountains. Hollow's Edge was a quiet, unassuming place with a tight-knit community. The town was surrounded by thick, untamed forests that seemed to stretch on forever. Despite its peaceful appearance, Hollow's Edge was home to many dark legends, the most notorious being the tale of the Hollow's Edge werewolf. According to the legend, a man named Elias Barrett had been cursed by a witch many generations ago. Every full moon, Elias would transform into a monstrous wolf, doomed to roam the forests and terrorize the townsfolk. Over the years, many had claimed to see the beast, but no one had ever come close to capturing or killing it. The stories were often dismissed as mere folklore, something to scare children and keep them from wandering too far into the woods. One summer evening, I was camping with my friends, Jake, Sarah, and Lisa, near the edge of the forest. We had grown up hearing the stories, but none of us believed in them. We were just looking for a fun night out under the stars. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the landscape. We built a campfire, roasted marshmallows, and shared ghost stories, laughing at how ridiculous they all sounded. As the night wore on, a strange sense of unease settled over us. The usual sounds of the forest crickets, owls, and rustling leaves seemed to fade away, leaving an eerie silence. It was Sarah who first noticed it. "Guys, do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We fell silent, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing, just the crackling of the fire. But then we heard a low, guttural growl coming from the darkness beyond the firelight. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Jake, always the skeptic, stood up and grabbed a flashlight. "It's probably just a raccoon or something," he said, shining the beam into the trees. But the light revealed nothing. The growl came again, louder this time, and closer. We huddled together, our eyes wide with fear. "Maybe we should go back to town," Isa suggested, her voice trembling. We all agreed, hastily packing up our gear. Just as we were about to leave, the growl turned into a deafening howl that echoed through the forest. We turned and saw a massive, shadowy figure standing at the edge of the firelight. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. Standing on two legs, it was covered in thick, dark fur. Its eyes glowed an eerie yellow, and its mouth was filled with sharp, glistening teeth. The Hollow's Edge werewolf. Panic surged through us, and we turned to run. The werewolf let out another bone-chilling howl and lunged towards us. We sprinted through the forest, the branches whipping at our faces, and the underbrush slowing us down. I could hear the creature crashing through the woods behind us, its heavy footsteps growing louder. We reached an old, abandoned cabin, and without thinking, we bolted inside and slammed the door shut. The cabin was small and musty, with a single window and a heavy wooden door. We barricaded the door with the table and whatever furniture we could find. The werewolf reached the cabin and began pounding on the door, its claws tearing at the wood. We grabbed anything we could use as a weapon: an old rifle, a rusty hatchet, and a broken chair leg. The door shook violently, and I aimed the rifle at the opening, my hands trembling with fear. For what felt like hours, the werewolf assaulted the cabin, trying to break through. Its howls echoed through the night, a terrifying reminder of the danger we were in. Just when I thought the door would give way, the attack ceased. Silence fell over the forest once again. We waited, our breath coming in shallow gasps. After what seemed like an eternity, I cautiously opened the door and peered outside. The werewolf was gone, but deep claw marks and splintered wood were left as evidence of its presence. We made our way back to town at dawn, exhausted and shaken. Our story was met with disbelief and skepticism, but the claw marks on the cabin were proof enough for some. The legend of the Hollow's Edge werewolf had proven to be more than just a tale. The town council decided to close off the forest, deeming it too dangerous for anyone to venture into. A team of investigators was sent to search for the creature, but the werewolf remained elusive. The legend of Hollow's Edge had become a living nightmare. I left Hollow's Edge shortly after that incident, unable to face the forest that had once been my sanctuary. I moved to a city far from the woods and their hidden horrors. But the memory of that night haunts me still. My name is Emily, and I used to live in a small town called Moonlit Creek, a picturesque place nestled between dense forests and rolling hills. The town was named for the creek that ran through it, which sparkled like silver under the light of the full moon. Moonlit Creek was a quiet, idyllic place where everyone knew each other. However, beneath its serene surface lay a dark secreta legend that had haunted the town for generations. The story of the Moonlit Creek werewolf was well known among the townsfolk. It was said that many years ago, a young woman named Eliza had been cursed by a spurned lover who dabbled in dark magic. Under the light of the full moon, Eliza would transform into a fearsome werewolf, doomed to roam the forests and terrorize the townspeople. Over the years, many claimed to have seen the beast, but it always vanished without a trace, leaving behind only tales of horror and fear. Despite growing up with these stories, I never believed in them. They were just part of the town's folklore, nothing more. My skepticism persisted until one fateful night that changed everything. It was a warm summer evening, and my friends Mikkel, Jenny, and Alexa and I decided to go camping near the creek. We had done this many times before, and it always promised a night of fun and adventure. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape as we set up our tents and built a campfire. We spent the evening roasting marshmallows, telling stories, and laughing under the starry sky. As the night wore on, a sense of unease began to settle over us. The usual sounds of the forest crickets chirping, owls hooting seemed to fade away, replaced by an eerie silence. It was Michael who first noticed it. "Do you guys hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We fell silent, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing, just the crackling of the fire. But then we heard a low, guttural growl coming from the darkness beyond the firelight. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Jenny grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the trees, but the light revealed nothing. The growl came again, louder this time, and closer. We huddled together, our eyes wide with fear. "Maybe we should head back to town," Alex suggested, his voice trembling. We all agreed, and quickly began packing up our gear. Just as we were about to leave, the growl turned into a deafening howl that echoed through the forest. We turned and saw a massive, shadowy figure standing at the edge of the firelight. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. Standing on two legs, it was covered in thick, dark fur. Its eyes glowed an eerie yellow, and its mouth was filled with sharp, glistening teeth. The Moonlit Creek werewolf. Panic surged through us, and we turned to run. The werewolf let out another bone-chilling howl and lunged towards us. We sprinted through the forest, the branches whipping at our faces, and the underbrush slowing us down. I could hear the creature crashing through the woods behind us, its heavy footsteps growing louder. We reached an old, abandoned cabin that had been forgotten in the depths of the forest. Without thinking, we bolted inside and slammed the door shut. The cabin was small and musty, with a single window and a heavy wooden door. We barricaded the door with the table and whatever furniture we could find. The werewolf reached the cabin and began pounding on the door, its claws tearing at the wood. We grabbed anything we could use as a weapon: an old rifle, a rusty hatchet, and a broken chair leg. The door shook violently, and I aimed the rifle at the opening, my hands trembling with fear. For what felt like hours, the werewolf assaulted the cabin, trying to break through. Its howls echoed through the night, a terrifying reminder of the danger we were in. Just when I thought the door would give way, the attack ceased. Silence fell over the forest once again. We waited, our breath coming in shallow gasps. After what seemed like an eternity, I cautiously opened the door and peered outside. The werewolf was gone, but deep claw marks and splintered wood were left as evidence of its presence. We made our way back to town at dawn, exhausted and shaken. Our story was met with disbelief and skepticism, but the claw marks on the cabin were proof enough for some. The legend of the Moonlit Creek werewolf had proven to be more than just a tale. The town council decided to close off the forest, deeming it too dangerous for anyone to venture into. A team of investigators was sent to search for the creature, but the werewolf remained elusive. The legend of Moonlit Creek had become a living nightmare. I left Moonlit Creek shortly after that incident, unable to face the forest that had once been my sanctuary. I moved to a city far from the woods and their hidden horrors. But the memory of that night haunts me still. My name is Tom, and I grew up in Silverwood, a small, tight-knit community surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills. The town was named after the towering silver birch trees that lined its outskirts. Silverwood was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and the townsfolk were like one big family. But as close-knit as we were, there was one topic that people rarely discussed: the legend of the Silverwood werewolf. According to the stories, a man named Henry Winters had been cursed by a vengeful witch many years ago. The curse turned him into a werewolf under the light of the full moon, doomed to terrorize the town he once called home. Over the years, sightings of the beast had been reported, but no one had ever been able to prove its existence. Most people dismissed the legend as nothing more than a scary story to keep children from wandering too far into the woods. I never gave much thought to the legend until one fateful summer evening. It was the night of the annual Silverwood Fair, a beloved tradition that brought the entire town together. The fair was held in the town square, a large open space surrounded by old oak trees. There were food stalls, games, and rides, and the air was filled with laughter and the sounds of carnival music. As the sun set and the full moon rose, casting a silver glow over the fairgrounds, I felt a strange sense of unease. I was with my friends Megan, Jake, and Sarah. We decided to take a break from the festivities and explore the woods. It was something we had done many times before, and the idea of a moonlit adventure was too tempting to resist. We left the fair and headed towards the forest, our laughter echoing through the trees. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the sounds of the fair faded away, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. The full moon cast long shadows, making the forest appear both magical and menacing. We reached a small clearing and decided to sit down and enjoy the night. Megan pulled out a flashlight and began telling ghost stories, her voice hushed and dramatic. We were so engrossed in her tales that we didn't notice the silence that had fallen over the forest until it was too late. A low, menacing growl interrupted Megan's story, and we all froze. Jake shone his flashlight into the darkness, and that's when we saw a massive figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It was covered in dark, matted fur, and stood on two legs, its muscular body towering over us. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and its mouth was filled with sharp, glistening teeth. It was the Silverwood werewolf, just like in the stories. Panic surged through us, and we turned to run, our hearts pounding in our chests. The werewolf let out a bone-chilling howl and lunged after us. We sprinted through the forest, the branches whipping at our faces, the underbrush slowing us down. We reached an old, abandoned cabin that had been forgotten in the depths of the forest. Without thinking, we bolted inside and slammed the door shut. The cabin was dark and musty, with a single window and a heavy wooden door. We barricaded the door with an old table and whatever else we could find. The werewolf reached the cabin and began pounding on the door, its claws tearing at the wood. We grabbed anything we could use as a weapon: an old rifle, a rusty axe, and a broken chair leg. The door shook violently, and I aimed the rifle at the opening, my hands trembling with fear. For what felt like hours, the werewolf assaulted the cabin, trying to break through. Its howls echoed through the night, a terrifying reminder of the danger we were in. Just when I thought the door would give way, the attack ceased. Silence fell over the forest once again. We waited, our breath coming in shallow gasps. After what seemed like an eternity, I cautiously opened the door and peered outside. The werewolf was gone, but deep claw marks and splintered wood were left as evidence of its presence. We made our way back to town at dawn, exhausted and shaken. Our story was met with disbelief and skepticism, but the claw marks on the cabin were proof enough for some. The legend of the Silverwood werewolf had proven to be more than just a tale. The town council decided to close off the forest, deeming it too dangerous for anyone to venture into. A team of investigators was sent to search for the creature, but the werewolf remained elusive. The legend of Silverwood had become a living nightmare. I left Silverwood shortly after that incident, unable to face the forest that had once been my sanctuary. I moved to a city far from the woods and their hidden horrors. But the memory of that night haunts me still. My name is Liam, and I used to live in the small town of Blackwood, nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Blackwood was surrounded by thick, ancient forests that were both beautiful and mysterious. The town was named after the dark, towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets to anyone who dared venture too close. It was a quiet, close-knit community, where everyone knew everyone, and life moved at a leisurely pace. But Blackwood had its share of dark tales, none more chilling than the legend of the Blackwood werewolf. The legend spoke of a man named Samuel Hawthorne, who had lived in Blackwood over a century ago. Samuel was a recluse, known for his strange habits and unsettling demeanor. One night, under the light of a full moon, he was found dead in his cabin, torn apart by what appeared to be a wild animal. Soon after his death, sightings of a monstrous creature began to surface. And it wasn't long before people started to believe that Samuel had been cursed, transforming into a werewolf to exact revenge on those who wronged him. As kids, my friends and I loved to scare each other with stories of the Blackwood werewolf. We'd sit around bonfires, the flames casting eerie shadows on our faces, and recount the tales we'd heard from our grandparents. But like most legends, we never really believed it was true till one fateful night. It was the summer after I graduated high school. My friends Sethan, Grace, and Natalie and I decided to go on one last adventure before we all went our separate ways for college. We planned a camping trip deep in Blackwood Forest, far from the safety of the town. We wanted to experience the thrill of the unknown, to test our courage against the darkness that lay beyond our familiar surroundings. We set up camp near a small, crystal-clear lake, its surface reflecting the full moon like a silver mirror. The forest was alive with the sounds of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. As the night grew darker, we gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. Ethan, always the prankster, decided to bring up the legend of the Blackwood werewolf. He recounted the story with dramatic flair, his voice low and menacing. We laughed it off, trying to hide our unease. But as the fire began to die down, a chilling silence fell over the forest. The usual night sounds seemed to vanish, leaving only the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of leaves. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. We froze, exchanging nervous glances. "Did you hear that?" Grace whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but his voice wavered. "Probably just a coyote," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. The growl came again, louder and closer this time. We grabbed our flashlights and shone them into the darkness, but saw nothing. Then, out of the shadows, a pair of glowing yellow eyes appeared. They were fixed on us, unblinking and predatory. The creature stepped into the light, and we saw it clearly, a hulking figure covered in dark, matted fur, standing on two legs. Its mouth was filled with sharp, gleaming teeth, and its eyes burned with a malevolent intelligence. It was the Blackwood werewolf. Panic surged through us, and we bolted from the campsite, our hearts pounding in our chests. We ran blindly through the forest, the branches tearing at our clothes and the underbrush tripping us up. The werewolf's howls echoed behind us, growing louder and more menacing with each passing moment. We stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Without thinking, we rushed inside and barricaded the door with whatever we could find. The cabin was dark and musty, with broken windows and decaying furniture. We could hear the werewolf outside, its growls and snarls sending waves of terror through us. The werewolf began to pound on the door, its claws ripping through the wood. We searched frantically for anything we could use as a weapon. Ethan found a rusty axe, while Grace and Natalie armed themselves with broken chair legs. I grabbed an old hunting rifle that was mounted on the wall, praying that it still worked. The door shook violently, and the werewolf's claws pierced through, creating jagged holes. I aimed the rifle at the door, my hands trembling. The werewolf let out a deafening howl and lunged at the opening, its eyes blazing with fury. For what felt like hours, the werewolf assaulted the cabin, trying to break through. We fought back with everything we had, striking at its claws and firing the rifle. But the beast was relentless, and it seemed like the door would give way at any moment. Just when we thought all hope was lost, the werewolf let out a final, anguished howl and retreated into the darkness. Silence fell over the forest once again, but we knew it wasn't over. The beast was still out there, waiting for another opportunity to strike. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, too afraid to sleep. As dawn broke, we cautiously stepped outside and made our way back to town. Our story was met with a mixture of disbelief and horror. Some people scoffed at our tale, while others looked at us with pity and concern. The town council decided to close off the forest, declaring it too dangerous for anyone to venture into. A team of hunters was sent to track down the werewolf, but they returned empty-handed. The legend of the Blackwood werewolf had become a living nightmare. I left Blackwood soon after that, unable to face the forest that had once been my playground. I moved to a city far away, hoping to leave the horrors of that night behind. But the memory of the werewolf haunts me still. My name is Ethan, and I never believed in the supernatural until that fateful night. I was a pragmatic man, always looking for logical explanations to life's mysteries. But one night changed everything for me and my friends. A night we will never forget. It was early October, the air crisp with the first hints of autumn. My friend Jessica, Tom, and Rakelin, I decided to spend a weekend at Tom's family cabin deep in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. We had all heard the stories about the Pine Barrens, tales of the Jersey Devil and other strange creatures, but we laughed them off as just that, stories. The cabin was a rustic retreat, nestled among towering pines and oaks, far from any semblance of civilization. We arrived just before dusk, excited for a weekend of relaxation and adventure. As night fell, we settled around the fireplace, the warm glow of the flames casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Tom, always the storyteller, began recounting local legends. He talked about the Jersey Devil, of course, but then he shifted to a less-known but equally terrifying tale of werewolves. According to the legend, a cursed family once lived in the Pine Barrens, and every full moon, they would transform into monstrous beasts, hunting any unfortunate soul who crossed their path. We laughed it off, teasing Tom for trying to scare us. But as the fire burned low and the night grew darker, an uneasy silence fell over the cabin. The wind howled through the trees, and strange noises echoed from the forest beyond. Around midnight, we heard a long, mournful howl that sent chills down our spines. Jessica clutched my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Tom tried to play it cool, but his voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. "It's probably just a coyote," he said. But deep down, we all knew it was something more. The howling grew closer, more menacing. We peered out the windows, trying to see into the darkness, but the thick forest obscured our view. Suddenly, a massive shape darted past the cabin, too fast for us to make out any details. "What was that?" Rachel gasped, her voice trembling. We grabbed our flashlights and ventured outside, our hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. The moon was full, casting an eerie light over the landscape. We scanned the area, but saw nothing unusual. Just as we were about to head back inside, we heard it again, a deep, guttural growl that seemed to come from all around us. We huddled together, our flashlights shaking in our hands. Then, out of the shadows, it appeared. The creature was massive, standing on two legs like a man, but covered in thick, matted fur. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its mouth was filled with sharp, gleaming teeth. It was a werewolf, just like in Tom's story. Panic set in, and we ran for the cabin, slamming the door behind us. The werewolf let out a blood-curdling howl and began to pound on the door, its claws tearing through the wood. We barricaded the door with furniture, our minds racing for a plan. Tom remembered his grandfather's hunting rifle, kept in a locked cabinet. He fumbled with the key, his hands shaking, but finally managed to unlock it. He loaded the rifle with trembling hands and took aim at the door. The werewolf's growls grew louder, more desperate. It was determined to get inside. Tom fired a shot through the door, and the creature let out a pained yelp. But it wasn't enough to stop it. The door began to splinter, and we knew we didn't have much time. Desperation took over. We searched the cabin for anything that could help us. Jessica found a box of old silverware, and a thought struck. Silver bullets. It was a long shot, but it was our only hope. We melted down the silverware in the fireplace, fashioning crude bullets from the molten metal. It took time, and every second felt like an eternity. The werewolf's attacks grew more ferocious, but we finally had our bullets ready. Tom loaded the rifle with the silver bullets, his face set with grim determination. The door gave way, and the werewolf lunged at us, its eyes burning with rage. Tom fired, hitting the creature square in the chest. The werewolf let out an agonized howl and collapsed, writhing in pain. Then, slowly, it began to transform. Its fur receded, and its monstrous features softened. Before our eyes, the werewolf became a monoman with fear and sorrow in his eyes. We watched in stunned silence as he took his last breath, a look of relief washing over his face. The curse was broken. The rest of the night passed in a blur. We called the authorities, but they found no trace of the werewolf or the man it had become. The cabin was marked as a place of tragedy, a testament to the dark legends of the Pine Barrens. We returned to our lives, but we were forever changed. The memory of that night haunted us, a reminder that some legends are rooted in truth. The werewolf of the Pine Barrens was real, and we had witnessed its final moments. My name is Emma, and I used to think that the stories about werewolves were just old legends meant to scare children. That was before the night that changed my life forever. Before that night, I was just a college student on a summer break, visiting my grandparents in their quaint, remote village nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains. My grandparents' village, Hollow Creek, was a small, tight-knit community where everyone knew each other. Life there was simple and quiet, a stark contrast to the bustling city where I attended school. I looked forward to spending time with my grandparents, hiking in the surrounding woods, and soaking in the peace that only such a place could offer. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, my grandfather shared a tale that had been passed down through generations. He spoke of the Hollow Creek Howler, creature that roamed the mountains, its eerie howl echoing through the valleys during the full moon. The older folks in the village believed it to be a werewolf, cursed to wander the wilderness in search of prey. I listened with a mixture of amusement and skepticism. It was hard to believe such a creature could exist in our modern world. But there was something in my grandfather's eyes, a glint of fear and conviction, that made me uneasy. That night, I couldn't sleep. The story had wormed its way into my mind, making every creak of the old house and every rustle outside seem sinister. Around midnight, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out into the cool night air. The village was silent, the only sounds being the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. I walked along the familiar path that led into the woods, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The full moon hung high in the sky, its pale light casting an eerie glow over the landscape. As I ventured deeper into the woods, I felt a growing sense of unease. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out of the darkness. I quickened my pace, telling myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. Then, I heard it howl. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard before, a chilling, bone-deep howl that sent shivers down my spine. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. The howl echoed through the trees, seeming to come from all directions at once. Panic surged through me, and I turned to head back to the village. But as I did, I caught sight of a figure moving through the trees. It was massive, towering over the underbrush, with glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The creature stepped into the moonlight, and I saw it clearly for the first time. It was covered in thick, dark fur, its body rippling with muscle. Its face was a grotesque mix of human and wolf, with a snarling mouth full of sharp teeth. The Hollow Creek Howler was real, and it was standing right in front of me. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. The creature watched me, its eyes never leaving mine. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it lunged at me. I turned and ran, my flashlight swinging wildly as I crashed through the underbrush. I could hear the creature behind me, its heavy footfalls and snarls growing closer. Just when I thought it would catch me, I tripped over a root and fell hard to the ground. The flashlight flew from my hand, and I lay there, dazed and terrified. The creature loomed over me, its hot breath on my face. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But the end never came. Instead, there was a sharp whistle, followed by a series of shouts. I opened my eyes to see a group of villagers, armed with torches and weapons, surrounding the creature. They drove it back, their torches, creating a wall of fire and light. The creature snarled and retreated into the darkness, its howls echoing through the trees. The villagers helped me to my feet, their faces grim and determined. Among them was my grandfather, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and fear. They escorted me back to the village, where I learned that the Hollow Creek Howler was no mere legend. The villagers had been fighting it for generations, a battle that had become a part of their way of life. Over the next few days, I learned more about the creature and the curse that bound it to the mountains. The villagers believed it to be the spirit of a man who had been wronged long ago, cursed to live as a beast until his thirst for vengeance was satisfied. They had developed ways to protect themselves, using silver weapons and sacred rituals, but the creature was cunning and relentless. I couldn't leave Hollow Creek, not after what I had experienced. I joined the villagers in their fight, learning their ways and standing with them against the darkness. The Hollow Creek Howler was still out there, a constant threat, but we were prepared. We had each other, and we had the strength to face whatever nightmares the full moon might bring. As the years went by, I became a part of the village, my old life in the city a distant memory. The creature remained a constant presence, but we never gave up. We fought it with everything we had, knowing that as long as we stood together, we could keep the darkness at bay. And so, the story of the Hollow Creek Howler continued, a tale of fear and courage, of darkness and light. It was a story that I would one day pass down to my own children. A reminder that even in the face of unimaginable terror, there is always hope. My name is Ethan, and I used to be a firm believer in the rational world. Science, logic, and reason guided my every step. That was until a summer road trip led me to the outskirts of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and my life was forever changed by the terrifying encounter I had with the beast of Bray Road. It was the summer of 2022, and I was driving cross-country with my best friend, Alex. We were both avid fans of local folklore and cryptid tales. So when we heard about the infamous beast of Bray Road, we decided to take a detour and see if we could uncover the truth behind the legend. Bray Road is a quiet, rural stretch of highway that cuts through fields and forests. It's the kind of place where you can drive for miles without seeing another soul. As we approached the area, the sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the landscape. We pulled over to the side of the road to stretch our legs and take in the eerie beauty of our surroundings. "Do you think, actually see anything?" Alex asked, his voice tinged with excitement. "I doubt it," I replied, though I couldn't deny the thrill of the unknown. "But it'll be fun to explore." We decided to take a walk along the road, hoping to catch a glimpse of something out of the ordinary. The air was cool and still, and the only sounds were the distant calls of birds and the rustling of leaves. As we walked, we talked about the legend of the Beasta creature, said to be a werewolf-like monster that prowled the area, attacking livestock and scaring locals. We had been walking for about an hour when we heard a low growl coming from the woods to our right. We stopped in our tracks, our hearts pounding. The growl was followed by a rustling noise, and then silence. "What was that?" Alex whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we should get back to the car." We turned and started walking back the way we came, pace quickening with every step. The growl came again, closer this time, and we broke into a run. As we reached the car, we heard a loud crash behind us and turned to see a massive figure emerging from the trees. The creature was like nothing I had ever seen before. It stood on two legs, towering over us at nearly 7 feet tall. Its body was covered in thick, matted fur, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent yellow light. It had the face of a wolf, with a long snout and sharp, gleaming teeth. The beast of Bray Road. We scrambled into the car, slamming the doors shut just as the creature lunged at us. It smashed into the side of the car with incredible force, rocking it on its wheels. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, and finally managed to start the engine. The beast clawed at the windows, its snarls filling the air as I floored the gas pedal and sped away. We drove for miles, our hearts racing and our minds struggling to process what we had just seen. Eventually, we pulled over at a gas station, still trembling with fear. We told the attendant what had happened, and he nodded grimly. "You're not the first to see it," he said. "That thing's been around for years. Some say it's a werewolf, others think it's something else entirely. All I know is, it's real." We didn't stick around to find out more. We left Elkhorn that night, vowing never to return. But the encounter haunted us, a constant reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation. I tried to move on with my life, but I couldn't shake the image of the beast from my mind. Months passed, and I found myself drawn back to the legend. I started researching other encounters, speaking with locals, and piecing together the history of the beast. The stories varied, but one thing was clear: whatever it was dangerous. I decided to return to Bray Road, determined to uncover the truth. This time, I was prepared. I brought cameras, recording equipment, and a group of friends who shared my interest in the paranormal. We set up camp near the road, ready to document any signs of the creature. For days, we saw nothing. The nights were uneventful, and I began to wonder if the beast had moved on. But on the fifth night, as we sat around the campfire, we heard the growl again. This time, we were ready. We grabbed our equipment and moved toward the sound. The growl grew louder, and we saw the creature standing at the edge of the woods, watching us with those eerie yellow eyes. We filmed everything, capturing the beast as it slowly advanced toward us. But something was different this time. The creature seemed hesitant, almost as if it were curious about us. It stopped a few feet away, sniffing the air. I took a step forward, my heart pounding. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The beast stared at me for a long moment, and then, to my amazement, it spoke. "I am the guardian," it said, in a deep, gravelly voice. "I protect these lands." We were stunned. The idea that the beast could speak was beyond anything we had imagined. I tried to ask more questions, but the creature turned and disappeared into the woods. We returned to our camp, shaken but exhilarated. We had captured the encounter on film, proof that the beast was real and far more intelligent than we had thought. We left Bray Road the next day, but the experience stayed with us. I shared our footage and story with the world, hoping to shed light on the mystery of the beast of Bray Road. Some believed us, others didn't. But I knew the truth. There are things in this world that we can't explain, creatures that exist beyond our understanding. And somewhere in the dark woods of Wisconsin, the beast of Bray Road still watches over its territory, a guardian of the night. My name is Lucas, and until a few years ago, I was just an ordinary guy with an ordinary job, living in an ordinary town. But everything changed one fateful night, when I encountered something that defied all logic and reason, a werewolf. This is my story. It was a cold winter evening in 2019 when my friends and I decided to rent a cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway. The cabin was located in the heart of the Blackwood Forest, a remote and dense woodland area known for its picturesque beauty and tranquility. Little did we know that this serene place harbored a dark secret. We arrived at the cabin just before sunset. The drive through the winding forest roads was both beautiful and eerie, the tall trees casting long shadows in the fading light. We were excited to spend a few days away from the hustle and bustle of city life, surrounded by nature and good company. The first night was uneventful. We cooked dinner, played board games, and sat around the fireplace, sharing stories and laughter. As the night grew colder, we bundled up in our sleeping bags and drifted off to sleep, unaware of the horrors that awaited us. The next day, we decided to explore the forest. We hiked along the trails, admiring the snow-covered landscape and the crisp, fresh air. Everything seemed perfect until we stumbled upon a series of strange tracks in the snow. They were unlike anything we had ever seen, large, clawed footprints that appeared to belong to some kind of massive animal. Probably a bear, a friend Mark suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. "Whatever it is, it's huge," added Sarah, her voice tinged with unease. We decided to follow the tracks, curiosity getting the better of us. They led us deeper into the forest, where the trees grew thicker and the light dimmer. The air felt heavy, and an unsettling silence fell over us. As we continued, the tracks became more erratic, as if the creature had been running. Suddenly, we heard a low growl echoing through the trees. We stopped, our hearts pounding. The growl grew louder, closer, and then we saw it, a massive, shadowy figure moving swiftly between the trees. Panic surged through us, and we turned to run back to the cabin. We reached the cabin, breathless and terrified, slamming the door shut behind us. The growls continued outside, accompanied by the sound of something large moving through the underbrush. We locked all the doors and windows, our eyes wide with fear. "What the hell was that?" Mark demanded, his face pale. "I don't know," I replied, my mind racing. "But whatever it is, it's not a bear." The growl ceased, and the forest fell silent once more. We spent the rest of the day huddled in the cabin, too scared to venture outside. As night fell, The sense of dread grew stronger. We took turns keeping watch, each of us clutching makeshift weapons, kitchen knives, fire pokers, anything we could find. Around midnight, the howling began. It was a sound that chilled me to the bone, a haunting, mournful cry that echoed through the forest. The creature was out there, hunting, and we were its prey. The howling grew louder, and we heard scratching at the door. The creature was trying to get in. We backed away, our hearts pounding in our chests. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the beast stood before us. It was a werewolf, just like in the stories. It stood over 7 feet tall, covered in dark fur, with glowing yellow eyes, and a mouth full of sharp, gleaming teeth. It growled, its eyes locking onto us. "Get back!" I shouted, brandishing a knife. The werewolf lunged at us, and chaos erupted. We fought desperately, using everything at our disposal to fend off the creature. Mark swung a fire poker, hitting the werewolf's shoulder and causing it to snarl in pain. Sarah threw a chair, which shattered against the beast's side. I stabbed at it with my knife, but it barely seemed to notice. The werewolf swiped at Mark, its claws raking across his chest. He cried out in pain and fell to the floor. Sarah screamed, and the beast turned its attention to her. I knew I had to do something, or we were all going to die. In a desperate move, I grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the table and smashed it against the werewolf's head. The beast staggered, momentarily dazed. I grabbed a burning log from the fireplace and swung it at the creature, the flames licking its fur. The werewolf howled in pain and backed away, retreating into the night. We quickly barricaded the door, breaths coming in ragged gasps. Mark was bleeding heavily, and we did our best to tend to his wounds. The rest of the night was a blur of fear and adrenaline. We stayed on high alert, ready to fight if the werewolf returned. But it didn't. As dawn broke, we cautiously stepped outside, the forest eerily silent. We decided to leave the cabin and head back to town as quickly as possible. Mark was weak from blood loss, but we managed to get him to the car and drove to the nearest hospital. We told the doctors he had been attacked by a wild animal, not daring to mention the werewolf. Over the next few weeks, we tried to make sense of what had happened. We researched werewolves and found numerous accounts of similar encounters, but no concrete evidence. The locals in the nearby town had their own stories and warnings about the Blackwood Forest, but they all seemed reluctant to speak openly about it. The experience left us scarred, both physically and mentally. Mark recovered from his injuries, but the terror of that night haunted us all. We vowed never to return to the forest, and we tried to move on with our lives. But some things you can't forget. The image of the werewolf, its glowing eyes and snarling mouth, is burned into my memory. I know it's still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for its next victim. To anyone reading this, be careful. There are things in this world that defy explanation, creatures that exist beyond our understanding. And if you ever find yourself in the Blackwood Forest, remember this: when the howling starts, run. Run and don't look back. My name is Evelyn, and my life changed forever during a family vacation to a remote village nestled in the Carpathian Mountains. This place, shrouded in mystery and legend, would become the setting for the most terrifying experience of my life. It was here that I encountered something that I had only read about in books: a werewolf. My family and I had always loved traveling to unique and off-the-beaten-path destinations. This particular summer, we decided to explore Eastern Europe, and our journey led us to a quaint little village called Rukovina. The village was picturesque, with cobblestone streets, rustic houses, and lush forests surrounding it. The locals were friendly but reserved, their eyes holding secrets they were unwilling to share with strangers. We arrived at our rented cottage late in the afternoon, greeted by our host, an elderly woman named Irina. She was kind, but seemed nervous, constantly glancing at the forest as she spoke to us. "Welcome to Rukovina," she said, her voice tinged with an accent. "Please, stay inside after dark and lock your doors." The forest is not safe at night. My parents nodded, assuming her warning was about wild animals. We thanked her and settled into our cozy cottage, excited to explore the village and its surroundings. The first few days were wonderful. We hiked through the beautiful forests, visited ancient castles, and enjoyed the local cuisine. The villagers, though wary, warmed up to us gradually, sharing stories about the history of Rukovina and its legends. One legend, in particular, caught my attention: the tale of the werewolf. According to the legend, a cursed creature roamed the forests under the full moon, preying on anyone who dared to venture out at night. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, their faces pale with fear. I dismissed it as superstition, a story to scare children. As our vacation neared its end, we decided to spend one last evening in the forest. The full moon was rising, casting a silver glow over the landscape. My younger brother, Leo, and I convinced our parents to let us stay out a bit longer to watch the moonlight dance through the trees. Reluctantly, they agreed, reminding us of Irina's warning. Leo and I wandered deeper into the forest, marveling at the beauty of the moonlit night. We found a clearing and sat down, enjoying the serene atmosphere. As the moon climbed higher, an eerie silence fell over the forest. The usual sounds of nocturnal animals were absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Suddenly, we heard a rustling in the bushes. Leo and I exchanged nervous glances, thinking it might be a deer or some other harmless creature. But the rustling grew louder, accompanied by a low, guttural growl. My heart pounded in my chest as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. Standing at least 7 feet tall, it had the body of a man, but was covered in thick, dark fur. Its eyes glowed with a sinister yellow light, and its elongated snout revealed sharp, gleaming teeth. The creature's claws were like daggers, and it moved with a predatory grace. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Leo's hand and pulling him to his feet. We sprinted through the forest, the werewolf's growls echoing behind us. I could hear its heavy footsteps gaining on us, and I knew we had to find shelter fast. Up ahead, I spotted a small, abandoned cabin and made a beeline for it. We burst through the door and slammed it shut, barricading it with whatever we could find. The werewolf pounded on the door, its claws scratching and tearing at the wood. Leo and I huddled in a corner, our hearts racing with fear. I prayed that the door would hold, that the creature would give up and leave us alone. Hours passed, and the pounding eventually ceased. We stayed in the cabin until dawn, too terrified to move. When the first rays of sunlight pierced through the cracks in the walls, we cautiously opened the door and stepped outside. The forest was quiet again, as if the night's terror had been a mere nightmare. We made our way back to the village, shaken but unharmed. Irina was waiting for us at the cottage, her face etched with worry. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. We nodded, too traumatized to speak. She sighed heavily and guided us inside, where our parents anxiously awaited our return. We recounted our ordeal, and Irina listened intently, her expression grave. "The werewolf is real," she said quietly. "It is a curse that has plagued our village for centuries. There is nothing we can do but protect ourselves and hope it does not claim more victims." We left Rukovina the next day, our hearts heavy with the weight of our encounter. The village faded into the distance, but the memory of that night remained vivid in my mind. The werewolf was not just a legend, it was a living nightmare that had crossed our path. To this day, I can still hear the creature's growls in my dreams, a haunting reminder of the terror that lurks in the shadows. I share my story as a warning to others: beware the full moon, and never dismiss the old legends. For in the heart of the forest, where the light of the moon barely reaches, the werewolf waits, hungry and relentless. Suddenly, we heard a rustling in the bushes. Leo and I exchanged nervous glances, thinking it might be a deer or some other harmless creature. But the rustling grew louder, accompanied by a low, guttural growl. My heart pounded in my chest as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. Standing at least 7 feet tall, it had the body of a man, but was covered in thick, dark fur. Its eyes glowed with a sinister yellow light, and its elongated snout revealed sharp, gleaming teeth. The creature's claws were like daggers, and it moved with a predatory grace. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Leo's hand and pulling him to his feet. We sprinted through the forest, the werewolf's growls echoing behind us. I could hear its heavy footsteps gaining on us, and I knew we had to find shelter fast. Up ahead, I spotted a small, abandoned cabin and made a beeline for it. We burst through the door and slammed it shut, barricading it with whatever we could find. The werewolf pounded on the door, its claws scratching and tearing at the wood. Leo and I huddled in a corner, our hearts racing with fear. I prayed that the door would hold, that the creature would give up and leave us alone. Hours passed, and the pounding eventually ceased. We stayed in the cabin until dawn, too terrified to move. When the first rays of sunlight pierced through the cracks in the walls, we cautiously opened the door and stepped outside. The forest was quiet again, as if the night's terror had been a mere nightmare. We made our way back to the village, shaken but unharmed. Irina was waiting for us at the cottage, her face etched with worry. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. We nodded, too traumatized to speak. She sighed heavily and guided us inside, where our parents anxiously awaited our return. We recounted our ordeal, and Irina listened intently, her expression grave. "The werewolf is real," she said quietly. "It is a curse that has plagued our village for centuries. There is nothing we can do but protect ourselves and hope it does not claim more victims." We left Rukovina the next day, our hearts heavy with the weight of our encounter. The village faded into the distance, but the memory of that night remained vivid in my mind. The werewolf was not just a legend, it was a living nightmare that had crossed our path. To this day, I can still hear the creature's growls in my dreams, a haunting reminder of the terror that lurks in the shadows. I share my story as a warning to others: beware the full moon, and never dismiss the old legends. For in the heart of the forest, where the light of the moon barely reaches, the werewolf waits, hungry and relentless. My name is Daniel, and I used to be a park ranger in a national park nestled in the Appalachian Mountains. The park, known for its dense forests and stunning vistas, was my second home. I knew every trail, every tree, and every hidden corner. But nothing could have prepared me for the night I encountered a werewolf. This is my story. It was late October, and the park was transitioning into the beautiful hues of autumn. Tourists flocked to witness the changing leaves, making the park busier than usual. My job was to ensure their safety and maintain the trails, but one particular evening would change everything. I had been assigned to the Crescent Ridge area, a remote part of the park that required a keen eye and a sense of responsibility. It was a quiet day, and as dusk approached, I decided to do one last patrol before heading back to the ranger station. As I walked along the trail, I noticed something strange. Deep, clawed footprints marked the path, leading into the dense underbrush. They were larger than any animal tracks I had seen before, and they sent a shiver down my spine. I radioed the station to report my findings, but static was all I got in return. The signal was notoriously weak in this part of the park. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow the tracks. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the trees, and an eerie silence enveloped the forest. The tracks led me deeper into the woods, where the trees grew closer together, blocking out the remaining light. Suddenly, I heard a low growl, deep and menacing. My heart skipped a beat as I scanned the area, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. There, not far ahead, I saw a hulking, dark figure moving between the trees. It was massive, its fur blending seamlessly with the shadows, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural yellow light. I froze, my mind racing. This was no ordinary animal. It was a werewolf. The creature noticed me and let out a bone-chilling howl. I turned and ran, my instincts taking over. I knew the trails well, but in my panic, everything seemed unfamiliar. I could hear the werewolf crashing through the underbrush behind me, its growls growing louder. I stumbled upon an old, abandoned ranger cabin and dashed inside, slamming the door shut behind me. The cabin was small and musty, with a single window and a heavy wooden door. I barricaded the door with a table and a chair, hoping it would hold. The werewolf reached the cabin and began pounding on the door, his claws tearing through the wood. I grabbed a rusty axe from a corner, ready to defend myself. The door shook violently, and splinters flew as the werewolf tried to break in. In a desperate move, I swung the axe at the creature's hand, as it reached through a hole in the door. The werewolf howled in pain and backed away, but I knew it wouldn't give up easily. I peered through the window and saw it circling the cabin, looking for another way in. Hours passed, and the werewolf continued its relentless assault. The door was barely holding, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it broke through. I had to find a way to escape. I remembered there was a cellar beneath the cabin, accessible through a trapdoor in the floor. I pried it open and climbed down, hoping it would lead to another exit. The cellar was dark and damp, with a narrow passage that seemed to stretch on forever. With the werewolf still pounding above, I made my way through the passage, praying it would lead to safety. After what felt like an eternity, I saw a faint light ahead. The passage opened into a small cave, and I hurried towards the light, emerging in a clearing not far from the main trail. I ran back to the ranger station, my heart pounding and my mind racing. When I burst through the door, my colleagues stared at me in shock. I was covered in dirt and sweat, and the look in my eyes must have conveyed the terror I had just experienced. I told them everything, and while some were skeptical, others had heard the old legends about the werewolf of Crescent Ridge. They knew I wasn't the first to encounter the beast. The park was closed the next day, and a team was sent to investigate. They found the cabin, destroyed and covered in claw marks, but the werewolf was nowhere to be found. The tracks led deeper into the forest, disappearing into the wilderness. I resigned from my job shortly after that incident. The park, once a place of beauty and peace, had become a source of nightmares. I moved to the city, far from the forests and their hidden dangers. To this day, I still hear the werewolves howl in my dreams, a haunting reminder of the terror that lurks in the shadows. I share my story as a warning: be careful when you venture into the wild, for there are creatures beyond our understanding, waiting for the darkness to fall. My name is Emily, and I've always been drawn to the mysteries of the world. Growing up in a small town nestled near Black Hollow Forest, I often heard tales of strange creatures and eerie happenings that fueled my curiosity. Little did I know that my fascination would lead me into a terrifying encounter with a werewolf, forever changing my life. I was in my early 30s, working as a freelance journalist, when I decided to investigate the legend of the Black Hollow werewolf. The story had been passed down through generations, describing a beast that roamed the forest during the full moon, hunting anyone who dared to venture too close. Skeptical but intrigued, I saw an opportunity to uncover the truth behind the myth. My research led me to an old woman named Agnes, who lived on the edge of the forest. She was known in the community as a keeper of local lore, and was said to have had her own encounter with the werewolf many years ago. Determined to learn more, I arranged to meet her, hoping she could provide some insight. Agnes welcomed me into her home, a quaint cottage filled with trinkets and relics from a bygone era. She was a frail but sharp-eyed woman, her presence commanding respect. As we sat down with cups of herbal tea, I explained my interest in the werewolf legend. "It's not just a legend, dear," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of fear and sadness. "The werewolf is real, and it's been a curse on this town for as long as I can remember." She told me about her own encounter, which had occurred when she was just a young girl. Her family had lived in the forest, and one night, during the full moon, they were attacked by a monstrous creature. Her father had fought bravely to protect them, but he was no match for the werewolf. Agnes and her mother had managed to escape, but the memory of that night had haunted her ever since. "The beast is drawn to the forest," she explained. "It's a curse, passed down through generations. Every so often, someone in the town is chosen, marked by the werewolf, and they become the next vessel for the curse." Her words sent shivers down my spine, but they also fueled my determination. I needed to see the werewolf for myself, to uncover the truth and break the cycle of fear that gripped the town. With Agnes's reluctant blessing, I decided to spend a few nights in the forest during the full moon. Armed with a camera, a flashlight, and a sense of purpose, I set up camp near the heart of Black Hollow, hoping to capture evidence of the creature. The first night was uneventful, the forest eerily silent under the moon's glow. I stayed awake, listening for any signs of movement, but all I heard was the rustle of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. As dawn approached, I began to doubt the stories, wondering if they were just products of overactive imaginations. The second night, however, was different. As the moon rose higher in the sky, I felt a strange energy in the air, a sense of foreboding that made my skin crawl. I heard the distant howl of a wolf, and my heart began to race. Gripping my flashlight, I ventured deeper into the forest, following the sound. It wasn't long before I saw it, a large, shadowy figure moving between the trees. My breath caught in my throat as I realized I was looking at the werewolf. It stood on two legs, its body covered in dark fur, its eyes glowing a menacing yellow. The creature sniffed the air, and I knew it had caught my scent. I tried to remain hidden, but my foot snapped a twig, and the werewolf's head snapped in my direction. With a low growl, it began to move toward me, and I knew I had to run. I bolted through the forest, branches scratching at my face and arms as I fled. The sound of the werewolf's heavy footsteps grew louder, and I could feel its hot breath on my neck. Desperation fueled my actions, and I stumbled into a small clearing. I turned to face the creature, my flashlight illuminating its terrifying form. The werewolf lunged at me, and I braced myself for the impact, but it never came. Instead, a shot rang out, and the werewolf yelped in pain. I turned to see a man standing at the edge of the clearing, holding a rifle. He fired again, and the werewolf retreated, disappearing into the darkness. The man rushed over to me, helping me to my feet. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I nodded, still in shock. "Who are you?" "My name is Ethan," he said. "I've been hunting that thing for years." "You're lucky I was nearby." Ethan explained that he had grown up in the town and had dedicated his life to stopping the werewolf. He had lost friends and family to the creature and had vowed to end the curse once and for all. Together, we returned to my camp, where he tended to my wounds and shared his knowledge of the werewolf. Over the next few days, Ethan and I devised a plan to trap and kill the werewolf. We gathered silver bullets, knowing that they were the only thing that could truly harm the beast. We set up a series of traps around the clearing, hoping to lure the creature in and end its reign of terror. The night of the full moon, we waited in silence, our nerves on edge. As the moon rose, we heard the familiar howl, and the werewolf emerged from the forest, drawn to the scent of the bait we had left out. It approached cautiously, its eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. When the werewolf stepped into one of the traps, it triggered a series of snares that immobilized the creature. Ethan and I emerged from our hiding spots, rifles aimed at the beast. The werewolf thrashed and howled, trying to free itself, but the silver-coated snares held firm. Ethan fired first, the silver bullet hitting the werewolf in the chest. The creature let out a blood-curdling scream, its body convulsing as the silver worked its way through its system. I followed suit, aiming for the heart, and fired. The werewolf collapsed to the ground, its form shifting back into that of a human. We approached cautiously, making sure the creature was truly dead. The curse had been lifted, and the town was finally free from the terror that had plagued it for generations. Ethan and I knew that we could never forget what we had seen and done, but we also knew that we had saved countless lives. In the days that followed, I wrote about our experience, sharing the truth behind the legend of the Black Hollow werewolf. The town slowly began to heal, and the fear that had gripped the community for so long began to fade. Agnes thanked us for our bravery, her eyes filled with a newfound hope. As for me, continued to explore the mysteries of the world. My encounter with the werewolf serving as a reminder of the darkness that lurks in the shadows. But I also knew that there was light to be found, and that courage and determination could overcome in the most terrifying of curses. Ethan and I remained friends, bound by the shared experience of facing the werewolf together. We knew that we had made a difference, and that the curse of Black Hollow Forest had finally been broken. My name is Jake, and I've spent most of my life in the mountains. I'm a park ranger stationed at Moonlit Ridge, a remote area known for its dense forests and breathtaking views. It's a job that requires solitude, resilience, and a love for the wilderness. But even in the vast expanse of nature, some things are too terrifying to comprehend. It started with a series of strange occurrences. Hikers reported hearing eerie howls at night, seeing large, shadowy figures darting between the trees, and finding mutilated animal carcasses. The local legends spoke of a beast that roamed the mountains during the full moon. But I always dismissed them as mere folklore until I encountered it myself. One evening, as I was doing my routine patrol, I heard a spine-chilling howl that echoed through the forest. It was unlike any animal sound I had ever heard. My curiosity piqued. I decided to investigate. Armed with my flashlight and rifle, I followed the sound deeper into the woods. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of nocturnal wildlife conspicuously absent. As I ventured further, I came across a clearing bathed in the light of the full moon. In the center of the clearing stood a massive creature, its body covered in thick, dark fur, its eyes glowing a menacing yellow. I froze in place, my heart pounding in my chest. The beast turned its head towards me, and I felt a wave of primal fear wash over me. It was a werewolf, something I had only read about in old legends and horror stories. But here it was, standing before me, very much real. The werewolf let out a low growl, and I knew I had to act fast. I raised my rifle and fired, the sound of the gunshot echoing through the trees. The beast howled in pain, but didn't fall. Instead, it lunged at me with incredible speed, knocking the rifle out of my hands and pinning me to the ground. I struggled to free myself, but the werewolf's strength was overwhelming. Just as I thought it was over, a blinding light filled the clearing, and the werewolf recoiled, releasing its grip on me. I scrambled to my feet, dazed and disoriented. A figure emerged from the trees, wielding a silver dagger that glinted in the moonlight. He was an older man, his face weathered and determined. With a swift motion, he struck the werewolf, the silver blade sinking into its flesh. The beast let out a final, agonized howl before collapsing to the ground, its body transforming back into that of a human. The man turned to me, his expression grim. "Are you all right?" he asked, helping me to my feet. "I think so," I replied, still in shock. "Who are you?" "My name is Samuel," he said. "I've been hunting this creature for years. It's a curse that's plagued these mountains for generations." As we stood there, the moonlight illuminating the fallen werewolf, Samuel explained that the creature was once a man who had been cursed, transforming into a beast during the full moon. The curse was passed down through his bloodline, and each generation had to bear the burden of the transformation. "I thought it was just a legend," I said, still trying to process what had happened. "Most people do," Samuel replied. "But I've seen too much to dismiss it. The only way to end the curse is to kill the beast with silver." In the days that followed, Samuel and I became unlikely allies. He taught me everything he knew about the werewolf and the curse that bound it. We tracked down other descendants of the cursed bloodline, hoping to prevent the cycle from continuing. One night, during another full moon, we encountered a young woman named Sarah. She had been hiding in a cabin deep in the woods, terrified of what she might become. She told us about the nightmares that plagued her and the strange, uncontrollable urges she felt. "We can help you," Samuel said gently. "But you need to trust us." Sarah reluctantly agreed, and we prepared for the night ahead. We fortified the cabin, using silver chains to restrain her and setting up a perimeter of traps around the area. As the moon rose, Sarah's transformation began, and she writhed in agony as her body contorted and changed. The werewolf that emerged was smaller and less powerful than the one we had faced before, but it was still dangerous. It snarled and snapped at us, its eyes filled with rage and fear. Samuel and I stood ready, our silver weapons at the ready. "It's all right, Sarah," Samuel said, his voice calm and steady. "We're here to help you." With a swift and precise strike, Samuel plunged his silver dagger into the werewolf's heart. The beast let out a final, pitiful whine before collapsing to the ground. As it died, it transformed back into Sarah, her body lifeless and still. I felt a pang of sadness and relief. We had ended the curse, but it had come at a great cost. Sarah had been an innocent victim, caught in a cycle of horror that she couldn't escape. In the aftermath, Samuel and I continued our work, ensuring that the curse would not spread to any more unsuspecting souls. We destroyed any remnants of the werewolf's bloodline, burning old documents and relics that could be used to revive the curse. As the years passed, the legends of the werewolf of Moonlit Ridge faded into obscurity, becoming just another ghost story told around campfires. But I never forgot what I had seen and experienced. The memory of the werewolf and the bravery of those who fought to end the curse stayed with me. Samuel and I remained friends, bound by our shared ordeal. We knew that the darkness in the world could never be fully eradicated. But we took comfort in the fact that we had made a difference, even if it was just in our little corner of the world. I continued my work as a park ranger, patrolling the forests and ensuring the safety of those who ventured into the wilderness. And every now and then, when the moon was full and the night was eerily quiet, I would think of the werewolf and the curse of Moonlit Ridge, grateful that I had been given the chance to face the darkness and live to tell the tale. My name is Rachel, and I've always been a skeptic. Ghost stories, urban legends, and supernatural tales never really held much sway over me. That all changed when I encountered the terror that lurks in Black Hollow. This is my story, a first-hand account of the nightmare that still haunts me to this day. Black Hollow is a small, isolated village nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains. The locals are a tight-knit community, wary of outsiders and steeped in superstition. My friend, Emma, had grown up there but left for college, only to return years later to settle her late grandmother's estate. She invited me to join her for a week, and I, needing a break from city life, eagerly agreed. As we drove through the winding mountain roads, Emma told me about the village's eerie history. There were stories of strange creatures, whispers of dark rituals, and a pervasive fear of the full moon. I brushed it off as local folklore, the kind of tales that every old village seems to have. We arrived at Emma's grandmother's house, a quaint, old-fashioned home that had seen better days. It was charming in its own way, with a large front porch and a garden that had grown wild over the years. As we settled in, the locals' wary glances and hushed conversations did little to shake my skepticism. On the second night, Emma and I decided to explore the nearby woods. The full moon illuminated our path, casting long, eerie shadows. As we ventured deeper, we heard strange low growls and rustling leaves that made us both uneasy. Emma, though familiar with the area, seemed nervous and suggested we head back. I agreed, but not before something caught my eye, a set of large, clawed footprints leading deeper into the forest. "Let's get out of here," Emma urged, pulling me away. Back at the house, Emma explained the village's most feared legend, the Black Hollow werewolf. According to the stories, a cursed bloodline in the village carried the werewolf gene, transforming into a beast during the full moon. The curse was said to have originated centuries ago, when a villager made a pact with dark forces for power and protection. The werewolf terrorized the village every full moon, and no one knew who the cursed individual was. As the night progressed, strange things began to happen. We heard scratching at the windows, and the sound of heavy footsteps circling the house. Emma and I huddled together, our fear palpable. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the front porch, and we both screamed. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously opened the front door. The porch was empty, but the clawed footprints were back, leading away from the house. Emma was visibly shaken, and I knew we couldn't stay there any longer. We decided to pack up and leave the village the next morning. However, fate had other plans. Around midnight, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. The scratching and growling grew louder, closer. We barricaded ourselves in the bedroom, clutching makeshift weapons, a kitchen knife and a heavy candlestick. The howling outside sent chills down my spine, and I realized that the legend of the Black Hollow werewolf was horrifyingly real. Just as I was about to lose hope, there was a loud bang on the bedroom door, followed by a familiar voice. "Emma, Rachel, it's me, Henry." It was Emma's childhood friend, a local who had always been kind to us. Relieved, we opened the door to find Henry, armed with a rifle and a determined look in his eyes. "We need to leave now," he said urgently. "The werewolf is close." We followed Henry through the darkened house and into the woods, moving as quickly and quietly as possible. The full moon cast an eerie glow, and every shadow seemed to hide a lurking danger. As we made our way through the forest, Henry explained that he had been hunting the werewolf for years, trying to end the curse that plagued his village. "We're almost there," Henry whispered, pointing to an old, abandoned church up ahead. "We can take refuge inside." Just as we reached the church, a blood-curdling howl pierced the night. The werewolf emerged from the trees, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. It was a massive, terrifying creature, its fur matted with blood, and its fangs bared in a snarl. Henry fired his rifle, the silver bullet striking the beast, but only slowing it down. "Go, get inside," Henry shouted, reloading his rifle. Emma and I scrambled into the church, slamming the heavy wooden door behind us. The werewolf pounded on the door, its claws splintering the wood. Henry joined us, his face grim. "There's no way out," he said, looking around the old church. "We have to kill it." Emma found an old silver cross, tarnished but still solid. "This might work," she said, handing it to Henry. He nodded, taking the cross and gripping it tightly. The werewolf broke through the door, its massive form filling the entrance. Henry charged at it, the silver cross held high. The werewolf roared in fury as the cross made contact with its flesh, burning it. In a desperate move, Henry plunged the cross into the werewolf's heart. The beast howled in agony, thrashing violently before collapsing to the ground. We watched in horrified fascination as the werewolf transformed back into a humana young man no older than 20, with a look of peace on his face. Henry knelt beside him, his expression sorrowful. "It's over," he said quietly. "The curse is finally broken." In the aftermath, the village slowly returned to normal. The fear that had gripped Black Hollow for generations began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism. Emma and I left the village, forever changed by our encounter with the supernatural. I returned to my life in the city, but the memories of that night stayed with me. I couldn't shake the image of the werewolf, nor the bravery of Henry and the villagers who fought to end the curse. I realized that some legends are rooted in truth, and that the world is far more mysterious and dangerous than I had ever imagined. Years later, I still think about Black Hollow and the night we faced the werewolf. It taught me to respect the unknown, to believe in the impossible, and to cherish the strength and courage of those who fight against the darkness. And though the scars of that night remain, know that we made a difference, bringing an end to a curse that had plagued a village for centuries. My name is Lucas, and I grew up in the remote town of Pine Creek, nestled deep in the Pacific Northwest, Pine Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were hard to keep. Yet, there was one secret that the town held tightly a secret. That would shatter the peaceful illusion of my childhood and haunt me for the rest of my life. It was the summer of my 18th year when everything changed. I had just graduated from high school, and like most of my friends, I was eagerly looking forward to leaving Pine Creek for college. But before we parted ways, we decided to celebrate with a camping trip in the nearby woods. It was a tradition, a final hurrah before adulthood beckoned. We chose a secluded spot by Blackwater Lake, a place we had visited many times before. The forest surrounding the lake was dense and untamed, filled with ancient trees that seemed to whisper secrets in the wind. As night fell, we gathered around the campfire, laughing and sharing stories. The full moon rose high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. As the night wore on, my best friend, Jake, began telling a story that had been passed down through generations in Pine Creek. It was the tale of the beast of the full moon, a creature that was said to stalk the woods, emerging only during the full moon to hunt its prey. According to the legend, the beast was a werewolf, cursed to roam the forest in search of human flesh. We all laughed, dismissing the story as mere superstition. But deep down, a sense of unease settled over us. There was something about the way Jake told the story, the way his eyes flickered with a hint of fear, that made it hard to completely ignore. Around midnight, we decided to call it a night. The fire was dying down, and the forest seemed to close in around us. As we crawled into our tents, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The sounds of the forest, usually comforting, now seemed sinister. I woke up to the sound of rustling outside my tent. At first, I thought it was just one of my friends, but as I listened more closely, I realized it was something else. Something large. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly unzipped my tent, peering out into the darkness. The moonlight illuminated a figure standing at the edge of our campsite. It was massive, easily over 7 feet tall, with fur that seemed to absorb the light. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, and its snarling mouth revealed rows of sharp, glistening teeth. I froze, unable to move or make a sound. The beast sniffed the air, its eyes locking onto mine. It took a step forward, and I could see its muscles rippling beneath its fur. Panic surged through me, and I scrambled to my feet, shouting a warning to my friends. Chaos erupted as everyone stumbled out of their tents, trying to make sense of the situation. The beast let out a blood-curdling howl, and we scattered in all directions. I ran blindly through the forest, branches whipping against my face, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, I'd hear the beast crashing through the underbrush, gaining on me. I stumbled and fell, the wind knocked out of me. As I lay there, struggling to breathe, the beast loomed over me, its hot breath on my face. Just as it was about to strike, a loud crack echoed through the forest. The beast howled in pain and turned, fleeing into the shadows. Jake stood there, holding a shotgun, his face pale and determined. He helped me to my feet, and we made our way back to the campsite, where we found the others huddled together, terrified but unharmed. We didn't sleep that night, keeping watch until the first light of dawn broke through the trees. The next day, we packed up and returned to Pine Creek, our carefree summer shattered. We told the authorities what had happened, but they dismissed our story as a prank or an overactive imagination. No one wanted to believe that the beast of the full moon was real. But we knew the truth. The beast was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next full moon. And though we tried to move on with our lives, the memory of that night haunted us all. Years passed, and I left Pine Creek, trying to escape the darkness that had taken root in my mind. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't outrun the fear. The beast was always there, in my nightmares, in the corners of my vision, a constant reminder of the night we faced the unimaginable. Then, one day, I received a call from Jake. He sounded frantic, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Lucas, it's back. The beast. It's hunting again." I returned to Pine Creek, determined to end the terror once and for all. Jake and I gathered our old friends, those who had survived that night with us. We armed ourselves with silver bullets, the only thing said to kill a werewolf, and ventured back into the woods. The full moon rose, casting an ominous light over the forest. We waited in silence, our nerves on edge. And then we heard the howl that had haunted our dreams for so long. The beast emerged, more terrifying than I remembered, its eyes filled with rage. We stood our ground, firing our weapons. The beast howled in pain as the silver bullet struck, but it didn't fall. It charged at us, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, our final stand. I aimed carefully and fired, the bullet striking the beast in the heart. It let out a final, anguished howl before collapsing to the ground. We watched in awe and horror as the beast transformed back into a humana man. We recognized from Pine Creek, one who had disappeared years ago. The curse was broken, but the scars remained. We had faced the unimaginable and survived, but the memory of that night would stay with us forever. The beast of the full moon was no more, but the darkness it had brought into our lives would never fully fade. As I left Pine Creek for the last time, I didn't help but feel a sense of closure. We had faced our fears, confronted the unknown, and emerged victorious. But I knew that the world was filled with other dark secrets, other terrors lurking in the shadows. And though I hoped never to encounter them, I was prepared to face whatever nightmares might come my way. My name is Emma, and I used to think that the stories about werewolves were just old legends meant to scare children. That was before the night that changed my life forever. Before that night, I was just a college student on a summer break, visiting my grandparents in their quaint, remote village nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains. My grandparents' village, Hollow Creek, was a small, tight-knit community where everyone knew each other. Life there was simple and quiet, a stark contrast to the bustling city where I attended school. I looked forward to spending time with my grandparents, hiking in the surrounding woods, and soaking in the peace that only such a place could offer. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, my grandfather shared a tale that had been passed down through generations. He spoke of the Hollow Creek howler, creature that roamed the mountains, its eerie howl echoing through the valleys during the full moon. The older folks in the village believed it to be a werewolf, cursed to wander the wilderness in search of prey. I listened with a mixture of amusement and skepticism. It was hard to believe such a creature could exist in our modern world. But there was something in my grandfather's eyes, a glint of fear and conviction, that made me uneasy. That night, I couldn't sleep. The story had wormed its way into my mind, making every creak of the old house and every rustle outside seem sinister. Around midnight, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out into the cool night air. The village was silent, the only sounds being the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. I walked along the familiar path that led into the woods, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The full moon hung high in the sky, its pale light casting an eerie glow over the landscape. As I ventured deeper into the woods, I felt a growing sense of unease. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out of the darkness. I quickened my pace, telling myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. Then, I heard it howl. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard before, a chilling, bone-deep howl that sent shivers down my spine. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. The howl echoed through the trees, seeming to come from all directions at once. Panic surged through me, and I turned to head back to the village. But as I did, I caught sight of a figure moving through the trees. It was massive, towering over the underbrush, with glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The creature stepped into the moonlight, and I saw it clearly for the first time. It was covered in thick, dark fur, its body rippling with muscle. Its face was a grotesque mix of human and wolf, with a snarling mouth full of sharp teeth. The Hollow Creek Howler was real, and it was standing right in front of me. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. The creature watched me, its eyes never leaving mine. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it lunged at me. I turned and ran, my flashlight swinging wildly as I crashed through the underbrush. I could hear the creature behind me, its heavy footfalls and snarls growing closer. Just when I thought it would catch me, I tripped over a root and fell hard to the ground. The flashlight flew from my hand, and I lay there, dazed and terrified. The creature loomed over me, its hot breath on my face. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But the end never came. Instead, there was a sharp whistle, followed by a series of shouts. I opened my eyes to see a group of villagers, armed with torches and weapons, surrounding the creature. They drove it back, their torches, creating a wall of fire and light. The creature snarled and retreated into the darkness, its howls echoing through the trees. The villagers helped me to my feet, their faces grim and determined. Among them was my grandfather, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and fear. They escorted me back to the village, where I learned that the Hollow Creek Howler was no mere legend. The villagers had been fighting it for generations, a battle that had become a part of their way of life. Over the next few days, I learned more about the creature and the curse that bound it to the mountains. The villagers believed it to be the spirit of a man who had been wronged long ago, cursed to live as a beast until his thirst for vengeance was satisfied. They had developed ways to protect themselves, using silver weapons and sacred rituals, but the creature was cunning and relentless. I couldn't leave Hollow Creek, not after what I had experienced. I joined the villagers in their fight, learning their ways and standing with them against the darkness. The Hollow Creek Howler was still out there, a constant threat, but we were prepared. We had each other, and we had the strength to face whatever nightmares the full moon might bring. As the years went by, I became a part of the village, my old life in the city a distant memory. The creature remained a constant presence, but we never gave up. We fought it with everything we had, knowing that as long as we stood together, we could keep the darkness at bay. And so, the story of the Hollow Creek Howler continued, a tale of fear and courage, of darkness and light. It was a story that I would one day pass down to my own children. A reminder that even in the face of unimaginable terror, there is always hope. My name is Sophia, and I once worked as a veterinarian in the small town of Elkhorn, Wisconsin. It's a place known for its rolling fields, friendly residents, and a certain local legend that I never gave much thought to until the day came face to face with it. Elkhorn is a town rich in folklore, and the most infamous tale is that of the Beast of Bray Road, a creature said to roam the countryside and terrorize anyone who crosses its path. As a rational person, I always dismissed these stories as mere superstition. But my skepticism was shattered one fateful autumn evening. I had just finished a long day at the clinic, treating everything from household pets to farm animals. As I drove home, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the fields. My route took me down Bray Road, a narrow, winding path bordered by dense woods on one side and open farmland on the other. It was then that I saw a large, dark figure standing in the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was a deer, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. The creature stood on two legs, towering over my car, its eyes glowing in the twilight. It was covered in thick, matted fur, and its face was a grotesque mix of human and wolf-like features. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature stared at me for what felt like an eternity before it let out a bone-chilling howl and disappeared into the woods. Shaken, I drove home as fast as I could, my mind racing with what I had just seen. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, a trick of the light. But the nightmares began, vivid dreams of the creature, its glowing eyes and menacing growls haunting my sleep. I decided to investigate the legend of the Beast of Bray Road, hoping to find some rational explanation for what I had encountered. I spoke to the locals, many of whom had their own stories of strange sightings and encounters. Some described the beast as a werewolf, while others believed it to be a cursed human. Despite the variations in their accounts, one thing was clear: there was something lurking in the woods of Bray Road. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I enlisted the help of my friend, James, a local historian with a keen interest in the paranormal. Together, we scoured old records and newspaper articles, looking for clues. We discovered that sightings of the beast dated back decades, and there were numerous reports of livestock mutilations and unexplained disappearances. One evening, as we pored over our findings in James's study, he mentioned a local legend about a curse. According to the story, a farmer named Ezekiel Thompson had made a pact with dark forces in the 1800s to protect his land from invaders. In exchange, he was cursed to transform into a beast every full moon, doomed to roam the countryside for eternity. Intrigued by the possibility of a connection, James and I decided to visit the site of Thompson's old farm, now long abandoned and overgrown. As we explored the decaying ruins, we found an old journal hidden beneath the floorboards of what used to be the farmhouse. The journal, written by Ezekiel Thompson himself, detailed his descent into madness and the horrors he experienced as the curse took hold. The entries were filled with desperate pleas for forgiveness and descriptions of the transformation process: how his bones would crack and reshape, how his senses would sharpen, and how an insatiable hunger for flesh would consume him. The final entry spoke of a ritual that could break the curse, but it was incomplete, the last page torn and missing. Armed with this new information, James and I decided to perform the ritual, in hopes of ending the curse and putting the Beast of Bray Road to rest. We gathered the necessary ingredients: herbs, candles, and a silver dagger, and made our way to the woods where the creature was last seen. It was a cold, moonlit night as we set up the ritual circle in a clearing near Bray Road. The atmosphere was tense, and every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made us jump. As we began the ritual, chanting the ancient words inscribed in the journal, a sense of foreboding filled the air. Halfway through the ritual, we heard a low growl, and the beast emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It charged at us, but we held our ground, continuing the incantation. The beast seemed to be in agony, thrashing and howling as the ritual took effect. Just as we were about to complete the ritual, the creature lunged at James, knocking him to the ground. In the struggle, the silver dagger was thrown from my grasp. Desperate, I reached for it and plunged it into the beast's heart. The creature let out a final, deafening roar before collapsing to the ground, its body convulsing and then going still. For a moment, there was silence. Then, before our eyes, the beast began to transform, its monstrous features fading away to reveal the body of a man. It was Ezekiel Thompson, his face peaceful in death, the curse finally broken. James and I buried Ezekiel's body near the old farm, giving him the rest he deserved. The sightings of the Beast of Bray Road ceased, and the town slowly returned to normal. But the memory of that night, and the knowledge of the dark forces that once roamed our woods, stayed with us. I continued my work as a veterinarian, but I never drove down Bray Road again. The legend of the Beast of Bray Road became just thought a legend. But I knew the truth, and I would always be grateful for the chance to put an end to the curse that had haunted our town for generations. My name is Max, and I used to be a professional hunter. I specialized in tracking and capturing dangerous animals that posed threats to rural communities. My line of work had brought me face to face with countless wild creatures. But nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered one fateful night in the forests of northern Minnesota. The town of Pine Hollow is a quiet place, nestled among thick forests and rolling hills. The locals are friendly, and the scenery is breathtaking, especially during the autumn when the leaves turn vibrant shades of red and gold. I had been called to Pine Hollow by the town's mayor, who was concerned about a series of livestock killings that had left the farmers on edge. When I arrived, I was briefed on the situation. Cattle and sheep had been found mutilated, their bodies torn apart with a ferocity that suggested a large predator. The locals whispered about the legend of the werewolf, a creature said to roam the woods under the light of the full moon. I had heard similar stories in other towns, and while I didn't believe in werewolves, I knew that fear could be a powerful force. I set up camp on the outskirts of town and began my investigation. Over the next few days, I found tracks that were larger than any wolf prints I had ever seen. They led deep into the forest, to a place the locals called Shadow Glen. It was a dark, foreboding area that even the bravest hunters avoided. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I decided to venture into Shadow Glen. The full moon was rising as I made my way through the dense woods. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. As I followed the tracks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and every shadow seemed to conceal some hidden danger. I had just reached a small clearing when I heard a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. I turned to see a figure emerging from the darkness, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It stood on two legs, its body covered in thick fur, and its face was a grotesque blend of human and wolf. The creature lunged at me, and I barely had time to react. I raised my rifle and fired, but the bullet seemed to have little effect. The werewolf knocked me to the ground, its claws tearing into my flesh. In a desperate move, I reached for my hunting knife and plunged it into the creature's side. It howled in pain and retreated into the shadows. Bleeding and disoriented, I stumbled back to my camp. I knew that I needed help, so I contacted a friend of mine, Dr. Emily Hawthorne, a renowned cryptozoologist with a particular interest in werewolf legends. She arrived the next day, bringing with her a wealth of knowledge and a determination to uncover the truth. Emily examined my wounds and confirmed that they matched the descriptions of werewolf attacks she had studied. She also noticed that the tracks I had found were not just large wolf prints, but a combination of human and animal footprints. We decided to return to Shadow Glen to gather more evidence and, if possible, put an end to the creature's reign of terror. As we prepared for our expedition, Emily shared her theories about werewolves. She believed that they were not supernatural beings, but rather humans afflicted with a rare and ancient curse that transformed them into beasts. Under the light of the full moon, the curse, she explained, could be broken, but it required a specific ritual performed at the exact moment of transformation. That night, armed with silver bullets and the knowledge of the ritual, we made our way back to Shadow Glen. The moon was full and bright, casting an eerie glow over the forest. We reached the clearing where I had first encountered the werewolf, and set up a makeshift altar, hoping to lure the creature and perform the ritual. As the moon reached its zenith, the air grew colder and the forest fell silent. Then, from the darkness, the werewolf appeared. It moved slowly, cautiously, its eyes fixed on us. Emily began the ritual, chanting the ancient words she had learned from her research. The creature seemed to be in a trance, drawn to the sound of her voice. Just as the ritual neared completion, the werewolf lunged at Emily. I fired my rifle, the silver bullet finding its mark and slowing the creature's advance. Emily continued the incantation, her voice unwavering despite the imminent danger. The werewolf howled in agony, its body convulsing as the curse began to lift. In a blinding flash of light, the werewolf transformed back into a humana young man, named Daniel, who had been reported missing several months earlier. He collapsed to the ground, exhausted but alive. The curse was broken, and the werewolf of Pine Hollow was no more. We brought Daniel back to the town, where he was reunited with his family. The story of the werewolf became part of the town's folklore, a tale of bravery and determination that would be told for generations. As for me, I continued my work as a hunter, but I never forgot the night I faced a werewolf and live to tell the tale. My name is Max, and this is my story. A story of courage, friendship, and the unyielding human spirit in the face of unimaginable horror. My name is David, and I used to be a park ranger in the vast wilderness of Montana. My job was to protect the natural beauty of the national park and ensure the safety of its visitors. I never thought I'd encounter something so otherworldly and terrifying, but one fateful night changed everything. The park had always been a place of peace and solitude for me. The towering pine trees, crystal clear lakes, and the call of the wild were like a second home. It was late October, and the nights had begun to grow colder. Reports of strange animal behavior started to trickle in, and I was tasked with investigating. One evening, I received a distress call from a group of campers, who claimed they had seen a large wolf-like creature prowling near their campsite. Concerned, I grabbed my flashlight and rifle and headed out to their location. As I approached the campsite, I could sense something was off. The air was thick with tension, and the silence was unnerving. The campers were huddled together, their faces pale with fear. They described the creature as massive, with glowing eyes and a sinister presence. Skeptical but cautious, I decided to stay with them through the night to ensure their safety. As the full moon rose high in the sky, we heard a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard before. The campers and I stayed close, our eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Suddenly, the creature emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing an eerie yellow. It stood on two legs, towering over us with a menacing presence. Its body was covered in thick, matted fur, and its claws were sharp enough to cut through steel. The beast let out a deafening howl, and the campers screamed in terror. I raised my rifle, but my hands were shaking. The creature lunged at us, and I fired a shot, hitting it in the shoulder. It yelped in pain, but didn't stop. The campers scattered, running in different directions. I stood my ground, firing another shot, but the creature was relentless. It swiped at me with its massive claws, knocking me to the ground. I thought I was done for, but then I remembered something my grandfather had told me when I was a child. He spoke of an old legend about a werewolf that haunted these woods, and how it could only be defeated by silver. With trembling hands, I reached for the silver pendant I always wore around my neck. It was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. I held the pendant up as the creature advanced on me. It hesitated, its glowing eyes fixated on the silver. Summoning all my courage, I threw the pendant at the beast. It let out a blood-curdling scream as the silver made contact, burning its flesh. The creature staggered back, its body convulsing in pain. Seizing the opportunity, I grabbed my rifle and fired a final shot, this time aiming for its heart. The creature let out one last howl before collapsing to the ground. In a flash of light, it transformed back into a humana man named Thomas, who had been missing for weeks. Thomas was barely alive, but he managed to whisper a few words before passing out. He spoke of a curse, one that had been passed down through his family for generations. With his death, the curse was broken, and the werewolf would no longer haunt these woods. I carried Thomas's body back to the ranger station, where the authorities were notified. The campers returned, shaken but unharmed. The story of the werewolf quickly spread through the town, but few believed it. To most, it was just another campfire tale, but for those of us who had witnessed it, the memory would forever haunt our dreams. In the months that followed, I resigned from my position as a park ranger. The events of that night had left a lasting scar on my soul. I moved to a small town far away from the woods, hoping to find some semblance of peace. But every full moon, I am reminded of the night I faced the werewolf and survived. My name is Marissa, and I used to be a wildlife photographer. My passion took me to some of the most remote and beautiful places in the world. Little did I know, My dream job would lead me to an encounter that would change my life forever. It all started when I received an assignment to photograph the elusive gray wolves of the Silver Pines National Forest. The forest was known for its dense trees, misty mornings, and eerie atmosphere. Legends about the area were plentiful, with stories of spirits, strange creatures, and unexplained disappearances. I was eager to capture the wolves on camera, not thinking much of the local folklore. I arrived at Silver Pines in late October, just as the leaves were turning golden and the nights were growing longer. I set up camp near a small clearing, where I hoped to catch sight of the wolves. The first few days were uneventful, filled with the usual sounds of the forest and occasional glimpses of wildlife. But as the full moon approached, things began to change. One evening, as I was reviewing my photos by the campfire, I heard a rustling in the bushes. Thinking it might be a wolf, I grabbed my camera and quietly moved towards the sound. Instead of a wolf, I found a man. He was tall, with disheveled hair and a wild look in his eyes. He seemed out of place, dressed in tattered clothes that looked like they had seen better days. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to hide my unease. "My name is Ethan," he replied, his voice low and urgent. "You need to leave this place. It's not safe during the full moon." I frowned, confused by his warning. "Why? What's going to happen?" Ethan glanced around nervously before answering. "There's a curse on these woods. A werewolf roams here, and it awakens with the full moon. If you stay, you'll be in grave danger." I couldn't help but feel skeptical. "A werewolf? That's just a legend." Ethan's eyes hardened. "It's no legend. I've seen it with my own eyes. Please, you need to leave before it's too late." Despite his earnest warning, I decided to stay. I was determined to capture the wolves on camera and didn't believe in superstitions. Ethan eventually left, shaking his head in frustration. The night of the full moon arrived, and an unsettling stillness settled over the forest. The usual sounds of nocturnal creatures were absent, replaced by an eerie silence. I set up my camera and waited, hoping to catch a glimpse of the wolves. Hours passed, and just as I was about to give up, I heard a howl that echoed through the trees, unlike any wolf I'd ever heard. My heart raced as I turned towards the sound. Emerging from the shadows was a massive figure, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It stood on two legs, towering over me, its fur matted and dark. The creature let out another howl, sending shivers down my spine. It was a werewolf, just as Ethan had warned. Panic set in, and I fumbled for my camera, hoping to capture the creature on film. But as I raised the camera, the werewolf lunged at me with lightning speed. I barely had time to react before it knocked me to the ground, its claws ripping through my clothes and skin. Pain shot through my body, and I screamed in terror. Just when I thought it was over, Ethan appeared, wielding a silver-tipped spear. He charged at the werewolf, plunging the spear into its side. The creature howled in pain, its body convulsing as the silver burned its flesh. It staggered back, giving me a chance to crawl away. Ethan continued to fight the werewolf, his movements swift and precise. With a final thrust, he drove the spear into the creature's heart. The werewolf let out one last, agonized howl before collapsing to the ground. In a flash of light, it transformed back into a man I recognized as the local park ranger, Jake, who had been missing for weeks. Jake lay motionless, the curse finally broken. Ethan knelt beside him, his expression one of sorrow and relief. I struggled to my feet, my body aching from the attack. "You saved me," I said, my voice trembling. "Thank you." Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with sadness. "Jake was my brother. He was cursed many years ago. I've been hunting him ever since, trying to end his suffering." I felt a pang of sympathy for Ethan and Jake. "I'm sorry, I didn't believe you." "It's not your fault," Ethan replied. "Most people don't believe until they see it for themselves." In the days that followed, I helped Ethan bury his brother and clean up the campsite. The authorities were notified, and the story of the werewolf spread through the town. Most dismissed it as a tall tale, but those who knew the truth remained silent. I left Silver Pines with a new respect for the unknown and a scar on my arm as a reminder of that night. My passion for photography remained, but my subjects changed. I began to document the strange and unexplained, sharing the stories of those who had encountered the supernatural. My name is Ava, and I was once a park ranger in the vast and dense forests of Oregon. My days were spent ensuring the safety of both the visitors and the wildlife, while my nights were usually quiet and uneventful. That was until one fateful evening, when I encountered something that forever changed my understanding of the natural world. It was early November, and the days were growing shorter. The forest was a kaleidoscope of autumn colors, with leaves carpeting the ground and a chill in the air that signaled the coming winter. On this particular evening, I was patrolling a less frequented area of the park known as Pine Hollow. It was a remote section, rich with wildlife, but also teeming with legends and stories of strange occurrences. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, I received a call on my radio. A hiker had reported hearing eerie howls and seeing strange tracks along one of the trails. Curious and slightly uneasy, I decided to investigate. I followed the coordinates provided, navigating through the thick underbrush and towering pines. The howls began as a distant, mournful sound, growing louder and more chilling the deeper I ventured. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and my instincts were on high alert. Eventually, I came across the tracks the hiker had mentioned. They were large, clawed prints, unlike any animal I'd ever seen in the forest. My heart raced as I followed them further into the woods. The full moon had risen by the time I reached a small clearing. The silvery light illuminated the area, casting an otherworldly glow. It was then that I saw it. Emerging from the shadows was a creature straight out of Narrations. Werewolf. It stood on two legs, its fur a dark, matted mess, and its eyes glowing with a fierce, predatory light. Frozen in place, I watched as the creature sniffed the air, its head turning towards me. My hand instinctively reached for the tranquilizer gun at my side, though I doubted it would be of much use against something so monstrous. Before I could react, the werewolf let out a bone-chilling howl and charged at me. In a split second, I fired the tranquilizer dart, hoping to slow it down. The dart hit its mark, and the creature staggered, but it didn't stop. It lunged at me with incredible speed, and I barely managed to dive out of the way. The werewolf's claws slashed through the air where I had just been standing. Desperately, I scrambled to my feet and ran. The forest blurred around me as I sprinted through the trees, the werewolf snarls echoing in my ears. I could hear its heavy footsteps gaining on me, and I knew I couldn't outrun it for long. In a moment of desperation, I veered off the trail and climbed a steep, rocky incline, hoping to lose it among the boulders. As I reached the top, I spotted an old, abandoned cabin. It was a relic from the early days of the park, long forgotten and overgrown. With no other options, I dashed inside and slammed the door shut. The cabin was dark and musty, with broken windows and decaying furniture. I could hear the werewolf outside, its growls growing louder as it circled the cabin. I knew the flimsy door wouldn't hold for long. Searching frantically, I found an old hunting rifle propped against the wall. It was rusty and looked like it hadn't been used in decades, but it was better than nothing. I loaded the rifle with trembling hands and aimed it at the door. The werewolf's claws scratched at the wood, and I could see its eyes peering through the broken window. It was only a matter of time before it broke through. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Just as the door began to splinter, deafening howl filled the air, but this one was different. It was a howl of pain. I peered through the window and saw another figure standing in the moonlit clearing. It was a man, tall and rugged, with a crossbow in his hands. He fired another bolt, striking the werewolf in the shoulder. The creature howled again, this time retreating into the forest. The man approached the cabin cautiously, lowering his crossbow. "Are you all right?" he called out. I nodded, still in shock. "I think so. Who are you?" "Name's Lucas," he replied. "I've been tracking that werewolf for months. It's not safe here. We need to leave before it comes back." I hesitated, but Lucas's urgency was clear. Grabbing the rifle, I followed him out of the cabin. We moved quickly through the forest, making our way to his campsite. As we walked, Lucas explained that he was a hunter, specializing in the supernatural. He had encountered werewolves before and knew how dangerous they could be. We reached his campsite, where a small fire burned, casting a warm glow. Lucas tended to the fire while I tried to process everything that had happened. He handed me a flask of water and sat down across from me. "That werewolf was once a man," Lucas began. "Cursed to transform under the full moon. There's a way to break the curse, but it's not easy." "How?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "We need to find the source of the curse," he explained. "Usually, it's an artifact or a place tied to dark magic. Destroying it can free the werewolf, but it's risky. The creature will do everything it can to protect it." I felt a mix of fear and determination. "What do we do next?" Lucas looked at me with a steely resolve. "We track the werewolf to its lair. That's where we'll find the source of the curse. Are you with me?" I nodded, feeling a newfound sense of purpose. "I'm with you." The next day, we set out at dawn. Lucas's knowledge of the forest and the supernatural was invaluable. He taught me how to track the werewolf, looking for signs of its presence: broken branches, claw marks, and the faint scent of decay. We moved quickly and quietly, knowing that time was against us. As the sun set, we found ourselves deep in the heart of the forest, where the trees grew thicker and the air felt heavy with an ominous presence. Lucas pointed to a cave entrance, hidden behind a tangle of vines and roots. "That's the lair," he whispered. "Be ready for anything." We entered the cave cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The walls were lined with ancient symbols and markings, and the air was thick with the stench of death. As we ventured deeper, we found the werewolf, standing guard over a small, ornate chest. The creature growled, baring its teeth. Lucas raised his crossbow, and I aimed the rifle. The werewolf lunged at us, and we fired simultaneously. The bolts and bullets struck it, but it kept coming. I could see the desperation in its eyes, the fight for its own existence. Lucas shouted for me to go for the chest. I sprinted towards it, dodging the werewolf's attacks. With all my strength, I smashed the chest open, revealing a dark, pulsating crystal. The werewolf let out a deafening howl, collapsing to the ground as the crystal shattered. In a flash of light, the werewolf transformed back into a monoman I recognized from the missing persons reports. He lay on the ground, weak but alive, the curse finally broken. Lucas helped him to his feet, and we made our way out of the cave. The forest felt different now, and less foreboding. As we emerged into the moonlight, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The man, now free from the curse, thanked us with tears in his eyes. Lucas nodded, his mission complete. We escorted the man back to civilization, ensuring he received the medical attention he needed. As for me, I returned to my duties as a park ranger, but with a new perspective. The forest was still filled with mysteries, but I knew I could face them with courage and determination. My encounter with the werewolf had changed me, making me stronger and more aware of the unseen dangers that lurk in the shadows. My name is Nathan, and I used to be a tour guide in the historic town of Red Hill. Nestled in the heart of Appalachia, Red Hill was known for its scenic views, charming old buildings, and a dark history that often drew in thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts. My job was to share the town's stories and secrets, but I never imagined that one day I would become a part of one. Red Hill was established in the early 1800s and quickly became a prosperous mining town. However, a series of tragic events, including mine collapses and mysterious disappearances, cast a long shadow over its history. Many locals believed the town was cursed, and whispers of supernatural occurrences were common. One autumn evening, as the leaves turned a fiery red and gold, I led a group of tourists on a ghost tour through the town's oldest cemetery. The air was crisp, and the atmosphere perfect for spooky stories. We walked among the weathered gravestones, and I recounted tales of restless spirits and tragic deaths. As we reached the far end of the cemetery, a woman in the group, named Linda, asked about the infamous Red Hill Beast. It was a local legend about a creature that supposedly haunted the woods surrounding the town. According to the legend, the beast was a cursed miner who had transformed into a monstrous creature, doomed to roam the forest under the light of the full moon. Intrigued by her question, I shared what little I knew. The story went that the miner had been caught in a cave and, in his desperation, made a pact with dark forces to survive. He emerged from the collapse, but no longer as a man. Those who claimed to have seen the beast described it as a massive, wolf-like creature with glowing red eyes. After the tour ended, Linda approached me, eager to learn more about the legend. She revealed that she was a journalist researching paranormal phenomena and had come to Red Hill specifically to investigate the beast. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and despite my skepticism, I agreed to help her. We spent the next few days interviewing locals and gathering information. Most dismissed the beast as a mere legend, but a few old-timers spoke of encounters that sent shivers down my spine. One man, Henry, recounted how he had seen the creature while hunting in the woods. He described it as taller than any man, with fur as black as night and eyes that seemed to pierce the soul. Our investigation led us to the outskirts of town, where the forest grew dense and the air felt heavy with foreboding. Determined to uncover the truth, Linda and I decided to camp out in the woods on the night of the full moon. We set up our tents near an old, abandoned mine shaft, the very place where the cursed miner was said to have made his pact. As darkness fell, the forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. The full moon cast an eerie glow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Linda, armed with her camera and recorder, was focused on capturing any evidence of the beast. Hours passed, and just as I began to doubt the legend, a distant howl echoed through the trees. It was a sound unlike any I had ever heard, deep, mournful, and filled with an otherworldly resonance. Linda's eyes widened with excitement, and she urged me to follow the sound. We ventured deeper into the woods, the howl growing louder and more chilling. The underbrush rustled, and shadows seemed to dance around us. Suddenly, we saw a massive, dark figure standing at the edge of a clearing. Its eyes glowed red, and it let out a low growl that sent a wave of terror through me. Before we could react, the beast lunged at us. Linda managed to snap a few photos before we turned and ran, adrenaline fueling our escape. The beast chased us through the forest, its heavy footsteps pounding the ground. Just when I thought it would catch us, we stumbled upon the old mine shaft. Without thinking, we ducked inside, hoping the narrow entrance would keep the beast at bay. The mine was cold and dark, the walls damp with moisture. We huddled together, trying to catch our breath, the sound of the beast's growls echoing outside. Hours passed, and eventually, the growls faded. We cautiously emerged from the mine, the first light of dawn breaking through the trees. Exhausted but alive, we made our way back to town, determined to share our experience. Linda's photos, though blurry, captured the silhouette of the beast, and her article brought renewed attention to the legend of the Red Hill Beast. Some dismissed it as a hoax, but others believed, sparking debates and drawing more visitors to the town. As for me, the encounter left me with a deeper respect for the mysteries of Red Hill. I continued to lead tours, but my stories now carried a hint of caution and reverence for the unknown. The forest still held its secrets, and the legend of the Red Hill Beast lived on, a reminder that some legends are rooted in truth,